Emanating from the deep, dark night from Main Street in Marysville, Ohio, it's the Grand Dark Conspiracy. I am your host, Daniel Bautz. It's my honor to be bringing you tonight's program. I hope that you're all ready for something that's a little controversial tonight, something that a lot of people will be very uncomfortable with, something that I even question bringing to the listening audience simply because of that fact. But here at the Grand Dark Conspiracy, we don't shy away from the darker aspects of what is out in the real world. So we're going to have a very interesting conversation tonight. We're going to be talking with Blanche Barton. And if you want to find out more about her, go on out to granddarkconspiracy.com. Links are up for you to follow there. We're going to be talking with her about her book, The Secret Life of a Satanist, the Authorized Biography of Anton LaVey. Now, if you're not familiar with Anton LaVey, he is the founder of the Church of Satan. So we're going to be talking about a very dark and, for a lot of people, a very frightening topic tonight, because this isn't something that is in the shadows. This is something that is very much out front and visible for anybody who actually wants to see this. So, and it's also something that is very misunderstood. So, just to clarify a little bit what a Satanist of Anton LaVey's bent is, it's not what you think of immediately. It's not, killing animals and sacrificing babies and doing things like that. It's much different, but we'll get into that when we have Blanche Barton on talking about the book. And Blanche Barton, for full disclosure, is also a Satanist, and she actually is a former High Priestess of the Church of Satan, and knew Anton LaVey personally. So that is all something we're going to discuss tonight. This is going to be a very interesting show, a very illuminating show for a lot of people out there. And, just so you know, this is something, like I said, we're not going to shy away from the darker things out there. We're going to bring those into the light here on the Grand Dark Conspiracy. We have a lot of different topics, and this one, I think, has been fairly controversial. At least some of the feedback that I've gotten has certainly seemed that way. So just to let you know, tonight's going to be a very different show than what you're usually going to get out of the Grand Dark Conspiracy. So, we do talk about a lot of dark topics, a lot of scary topics, but this is something that I think a lot of people aren't aware of, are scared of, and maybe once they listen to the show, they'll understand a little bit more about something, and it'll demystify it for them somewhat, because I don't think a lot of people understand what a LaVeyist Satanist is, and it's not what you would expect. I don't know what else to say about that. And when we have guests like this on the program, it's always a tense moment for me, because I know a lot of people do get upset. I've done some things in the past as far as with the program back when we were just a podcast or an online radio show that had a lot of people up in arms. But, we go ahead and we do those here because the Grand Dark Conspiracy is not afraid to cover the darker topics, not afraid to look in the shadows, and certainly not afraid to walk into the dark basement. That's just how we are here, and that's how we will continue to be. So tonight, it's Blanche Barton, and we'll be talking about The Secret Life of a Satanist, the Authorized Biography of Anton LaVey. Links are up at Grand Dark Conspiracy to Blanche Barton's website, which is actually the churchofsatan.com, and links are up to the publishing house that published the book, which is feralhouse.com, and links are up for the book where you can go click on it and get a copy of the book through Amazon to find out more about the man who created the Church of Satan. One of the things that I found particularly impressive about this book was that it didn't paint Anton LaVey as a deified saint or anything of that ilk. I think it painted a very accurate picture of a man, and it's very interesting. It's a kind of a warts and all kind of situation. There's a lot of things in here it doesn't seem to be very candy-coated, and it seems to be a very honest portrayal of the man who created the Church of Satan. But we'll get into all of that with Blanche Barton after our first break, which will be coming up in a few minutes here. But I just wanted to put it out there for everybody out there who's listening. This might be a very different topic. This might be something that you're not used to hearing, and I don't think this is a thing that necessarily needs swept under the rug. I think this is something, like I said, it needs to be brought out into light so people are aware of it and they understand at least the vantage point that the people out there who are following the teachings of Anton LaVey are coming from. And it's not, like I said, it's not what a lot of people imagine from a Satanist. It's not the baby killing, sacrificing, animal sacrifice kind of thing. That's not what Anton LaVey was about. And we'll talk about that. You'll find out a little bit more about that. Not to say that Anton LaVey wasn't adversarial towards, religions, specifically Christianity. It says a lot with the name that he chose for his religion that he helped make and bring up. The Church of Satan was they don't worship Satan per se. They chose that name to celebrate the rebellion that it implied. So, like I said, we'll cover all of this. Like I said, it's not necessarily what you would think of when you talk about Satanists, but it's not what we would call devil worship, but it's also not for the faint of heart. I don't know how else to say it. So it's still very dark, but it's not as dark as a lot of people may think. That's coming up here in just a little bit. Tomorrow night, we are going to do a nice change of pace for all of you. We're going to be talking with Dr. Linda Bender. Of course, links are up for her website as well, and links are up for you to get the book Animal Wisdom, Learning from the Spiritual Lives of Animals. So that's tomorrow night. We'll have Dr. Linda Bender on. We'll be talking about how people can kind of learn from the spiritual lives of animals and how having animals in your lives actually enhances your spiritual life and your whole life. And we'll talk with her a lot about her experiences as a veterinarian, her creation of the first pet therapy programs through the Ohio Mental Health Association. And we'll also talk about her nonprofit organization, From the Heart, which is where the proceeds from this book are being directed towards to help benefit animals and maintain their habitats in the wild. So that's what's coming up on Thursday night or tomorrow night. And then on Friday, it's darkest hours, myself and lay religious demonologist Dave Considine will be on the show, and we'll be co-hosting the Darkest Hours here on the Grand Dark Conspiracy. We'll have a few guests, but we'll also be soliciting phone calls from all the listeners out there who want to share their paranormal experiences, want to talk about topics that maybe they don't get to talk about with all their friends because they'll think they're crazy or anything like that. That's not going to happen here. We talk about this stuff all the time, and for the most part, we believe in most of the things that we talk about. So if you've had a UFO experience, you've had a ghost experience, you've had, a demonic experience, you've had a Ouija board story that you've been just itching to share, you can call in and share that with myself and Dave Considine and the listening audience of the Grand Dark Conspiracy, which is, terrestrial here on WQTT 1270 AM, streaming online, though, around the world on QT1270.com, and then also available after that around the world as well on iTunes as a podcast or through the GrandDarkConspiracy.com webpage. You can download any of the past episodes we've broadcast here on QT1270. So we've got a couple guests on Friday night, but they'll just be here for a short while, and we'll still have a time for listener calls, and we'll also be giving away a book on Friday to one of the listeners who calls in. We'll be giving away Andrea Message's book, The Ghost in the Coal Cellar, which if you listen to the program last Friday night, you'll get a kind of a gist for what that book is and what you can expect. She generously donated a copy that we will be generously donating to one of our listeners. So on Friday night, though, we have Susan Guy coming on, and we'll be talking with her about her book, Mobsters, Madams, and Murder in Steubenville, Ohio, the story of Little Chicago. Of course, links are up for her website, which is mobstersmadamsmurder.com, which that's that's a pretty cool website name, I have to admit. And we'll also have Polly Halstead on, and we'll be talking about her cookbook, Primal Cuisine, Cooking for the Paleo Diet, and we'll be discussing the paleo diet and what that means and potential health benefits that people could glean from having followed the paleo diet. And of course, it'll be myself and Dave Considine. We'll have This Week in Paranormal History, and we'll be taking your calls and having an open forum discussion with everybody who wants to about the paranormal, anything paranormal. So that's what's coming up for the rest of the week here on the Grand Dark Conspiracy. I hope that you're all excited. If you want to follow or get in touch with the Grand Dark Conspiracy, there's a lot of ways to do that. We've got 3 social media avenues of which you can do that, and also you can just email me at webmaster@granddarkconspiracy. But if you want to follow us via Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram, you can do that. There's links up at granddarkconspiracy.com on every page. Right underneath our banner, there's a Facebook logo, a Twitter logo, Instagram logo that you can click on. That'll take you directly to any of our information. But if you don't want to do that and you just want to link up, it's facebook.com. Grand Dark Conspiracy. Twitter is at GDC Feed, and Instagram is Grand Dark _Conspiracy. So those are all the ways that we're out there in the social media, and we share a lot of information specifically about the guests that are coming on the show the night that they're coming on, and we have a lot of fun with all those as well. Also, if you want to get the TuneIn app, so you can listen to the stream wherever you go, not just with your desktop or not just, terrestrially on the radio. Say you're traveling and you want to listen to the Grand Dark Conspiracy, in Florida or in Papua New Guinea. It doesn't matter. You can put the TuneIn app on your smartphone, and the links are on granddarkconspiracy.com to do that, and just click on it and subscribe to the QT1270 feed. And if you just already have the TuneIn app and you want to look for it, just search for QT1270. It should come up, and you can subscribe to it there. And then you can just tune in at 2 a.m. Eastern Standard Time every week, every day of the week as well, every weekday. So we're going to go ahead and take our first break, and when we come back, we'll have Blanche Barton on the line with us, and we'll be talking with her about The Secret Life of a Satanist, the authorized biography of Anton LaVey. So we'll be right back. It's my honor and pleasure to be welcoming onto the Grand Dark Conspiracy for the first time, Blanche Barton. She's written the book, The Secret Life of a Satanist, the authorized biography of Anton LaVey. Welcome to the Grand Dark Conspiracy, Blanche. It's a pleasure to have you on the program.
Glad to be here, Daniel.
So, you've written the book, the actual authorized biography of the founder of the Church of Satan, Anton LaVey, and I know the listeners out there are going to want to know a little bit about yourself, how you came in contact with Anton LaVey, and also how it is that you came to write the actual authorized biography of him.
Well, I've been a Satanist for many years, before I actually met him, about 10 years. I've been living my life. I graduated high school, went to college, and Satanism had always had something for me. It had a clarity and allowed me to summon up strength within myself. It's about individual thinking, innovation, creativity, standing up against the status quo. A lot of these ideas are inherent in Satanism, and there's always been a satanic figure in whatever context. We're in a Judeo-Christian society now, so our context is Lucifer and Satan, but, it's been Coyote, it's been Prometheus throughout the ages. There's always been that misfit, that heretic that guides people and inspires people to sort of question things. So that made sense to me from a very young age, and I applied it in my life. And I wrote to Anton LaVey and told him I admired him, and he wrote back, or his office wrote back, and said that if I was ever in the San Francisco area to please, call him up. So after I graduated, I was very excited by that opportunity, and so I called and said, I'm going to be in San Francisco. Would it be possible to take him out to dinner, shake his hand? And that worked out. We met, and by the end of that year, I was in San Francisco. I wanted to do whatever I could to make the Church of Satan stronger, to get this philosophy out to people, because I felt you can't move forward in your life unless you have a solid philosophy. And Satanism blends the creative, poetic mind of the human without sacrificing reasoning and rationality. It blends both of them in a wonderful alchemy. So I felt that was worth investing a lot of time in. And so we hit it off. As I volunteered in the organization, I was doing office work, answering a lot of questions, doing a lot of correspondence. In the old days, before the internet, we sent a lot of letters to people and a lot of general information out to people that were interested. And I found myself answering the same questions. And I thought, boy, if there was just a book that had this information about Anton LaVey in it and his life, he was a very unusual person. He was largely self-educated. He dropped out of high school to join the circus, run away and join the circus. What a dream. He became a lion trainer. He was a musical prodigy. So he worked the calliope, he worked band organs, all kinds of keyboard devices, oboe, and some other wind instruments. But there was always this core of him that was rebellious. So he really didn't fit in a lot of places. He fit in the circus, he fit in the carny, and he was always interested in the supernatural. This always haunted him, and he was always intrigued by sort of this human potential, this untapped reservoir, perhaps, of magic that you could apply in your own life. But when he did research on it, he found that a lot of the people that had gone in that direction really hadn't put it together in the same way that he was drawing it together. So he wanted to do that in his life. And so I wanted to communicate this man to people. He's a raconteur, he was very verbal. He told funny jokes. I used to tease him that he should write a book of parables that would be in the form of jokes. So I wanted to get this out, and I did. In 1990, the original biography came out. It was very well received, but this is an updated version because a lot happened between 1990 and now that should be covered. So that's all in the updated biography coming out soon.
So when we're talking about the book, and one of the things that I think comes across in the book itself is the fact that it's not sugar-coated to make Anton LaVey look like he was not who he was, as far as, like you mentioned, sometimes he would be, gentle or joking, but at the same time, and a minute later, he could become kind of, cold and cruel if necessary, if needed. It didn't kind of sugarcoat the potential at all. One of the things I thought was very intriguing about the book.
Well, I'm glad that comes across, because after someone passes away, especially, there's an impulse, especially if one is attracted to the philosophy and the kind of person that they were, to sort of wrap them in this gauze of sainthood. And Anton LaVey was the last person on earth who would want to be painted as a saint. He was innovative, he was angry, he was misanthropic, he loved animals, but he hated most people. And I hope that comes across in the book. He could be very demanding and painfully negative about the world sometimes, but he was ultimately, I see him as an idealist, because he wouldn't have done what he did. He wouldn't have put forward what he did with such gusto and such bravado if he didn't feel that individual humans, not the mass of humans who act very irrationally and very short-sightedly, but individual creative humans He wanted to touch them and inspire them and tell them they're not alone. So he started his organization as sort of a non sequitur of an organization for non-joiners. Essentially, it's for people that wouldn't really want to join any organization, but they feel this power, this alienation within them. And the most innovative, creative minds throughout history have always been charged with heresy. They've always gone against the status quo. Back to the tribal days when the shaman was sort of the outcast. He always had to be outside society because he had to see things from outside society in order to get that perspective. And he was the one who was cast out into the borderlands, who talking about your show, who explore all these strange conspiracy theories and all these strange phenomena and see how much is true, how much is false, how much is worth exploring. The world is a wonderfully complex place, and we want to explore and see what's out there.
Well, and that's another thing, when we talk about Satanism, it's going to immediately evoke a reaction from a lot of people, and not everybody understands that the Satanism that LaVey put forward is not, how do I put this, the devil worship. I always kind of try to disseminate it that way, like that there's devil worship, which is kind of the inverted Christianity, and then you have what LaVey put forward, which was a totally foreign to that concept. I don't know if you kind of want to explain kind of a brief overview of what the Satanism that LaVey put forward was.
Yes, of course, Daniel. You make the point perfectly, and a lot of Satanists make that point, that when we worship Satan, it's an anthropomorphic externalization of the power we feel within ourselves. I worship myself. I am my own God. And, now a lot of these self-help gurus, they talk about self-empowerment and creative visualization. All of that came out of the Church of Satan, All of that came out of 1969. 1966 is when he founded the organization. 69 is when the Satanic Bible was published, and it's been in continuous print since then. So it's had an effect on society and these philosophies. But the point is that this externalized satanic image is one of rebellion, one of intellect, and the reason, people say, well, if that's what you're all about, it's really like humanism, like extreme atheism or something. Why don't you just call it humanism, or why don't you call it something nicer than Satan? Why don't you call it Luciferianism? That would be maybe a little easier to take. But the point was that he wanted it to be, down your throat. You created this. This is what I'm giving back to you. These are the nightmares that you yourself have created. And what have you created them out of? Nothing. These are nothing. The Church of Satan, the Satanic Bible, these are strong metaphors, but the essence of it is, if you're afraid of the name Satan, if you can't take that, if you can't take that within yourself as the ultimate human archetype, the Satanic archetype, the ultimate human archetype, because he stands forth pridefully and refuses to bow down to anyone, including God. That's what Satanism is all about, is pride, intellect, creativity, passion, going where few other minds and hearts even dare to go. That's the satanic archetype that Anton LaVey articulated. And
well, that's interesting.
And if you're scared of the word Satan, what other words? How else have you been brainwashed? Like liberal, conservative, abortion, jihad, terrorist, whatever word you've been that is attached with a lot of emotionalism. That's Satan. That's where maybe you're being manipulated by the media, by advertisers, by politicians. People have their self-interest. So wake up. That's what it's all about. Wake up.
So, it's interesting that you mentioned the kind of New Age movement and the spark of the divine, as they like to call that, where you are are God on this earth, and that's kind of been, I want to say, whitewashed and cleaned up for easier consumption for those out there who don't want to admit that they're kind of taking a philosophy of what you've described of pride, and you're putting your will first to try and make the world in your own image.
Right. Yeah. You are your own God, and there is no guilt. We don't have an original sin. We have sins in Satanism, but the first satanic sin is stupidity. So it goes on from there. We're a little different with our and pretentiousness is our second one. So we're a little different. But as for the supernaturalism, yes, we very much do believe that human beings are storytelling. We're myth building creatures, and every religion of a society, I feel, is a wonderful artistic expression, like a joint expression of that society's hopes, dreams, ethics. All of these myths communicate who we are, what we want to be, what we idealize, whether it's a Christian myth or an island myth or, the Middle Eastern myths. They all have a purpose, and they're beautiful constructs, but they're not real. Satan is a wonderful construct for me. He's a wonderful metaphor, and he inspires me. When I go into the ritual chamber, he helps me focus on, this is where my power is. This is what I want to achieve in the world. But it's up to me to do that. I'm not looking for a demon or a devil or some guy with, horns and a tail to solve my problems for me. The point of Satanism is you are your own God. Therefore, you have the responsibilities of a God within your life.
So it's up to you to mold your life and make it as you wish, as opposed to looking for an external influence. So you're trying to pull out from the internal and put it into the external world around you. So you're looking inward as opposed to outward when you're dealing with this philosophy.
And that seems to work best for humans. Again, I do believe that we have powers. We have there's a language that is ill understood by science, but proto-science has always been, alchemy are the foundations of chemistry. We move intuitively before we move rationally. But if you don't have rationality first, Satanism approaches the supernatural. We investigate and enjoy and express the supernatural within the context of the intellectual decompression chamber, what we call it, when we put ourselves in that context. But we know the difference between the rational and irrational. But there's a great power within the poetic, within music, within literature, within poetry, within architecture. These are all wonderful expressions. And you can evoke, when you're in the foxhole, when your back is up against the wall, you have wonderful powers to evoke with those metaphors. But don't go out killing people because they don't pray the right way or something, because your God's better than their God. That's just nonsense and very, very dangerous. And when you inculcate your children with that, that's even more dangerous, and Judeo-Christianity has done that for a very, very long time, and we're seeing the consequences of that kind of brainwashing and closed-mindedness in the Middle East right now. I think Satanism is more pertinent than ever because of what's being seen as the consequences of religious fundamentalism and blindness around the world. Even in America, we're severely balkanized politically because our dialogue, our democratic dialogue, has reduced itself to the playground, just throwing epithets at each other instead of really getting at some very serious problems that are facing us. And I think Satanism just blasts away all of that dross, all of that gauze that's covering us, and says, look, these are problems. Don't demonize. Don't point your finger at us versus them. These are problems. Let's be rational and reasonable and approach the problems as they are. Don't try to pigeonhole people and then just throw doo-doo at each other,
But that's human nature. We want the conflict. I truly believe that. I think we as humans, there's something inside us that wants opposition. So we have something to overcome. We want to, and if we don't have that, we will create it. I think that's played out over and over in history. Some interesting things. There's a couple points I wanted to get to, but when you're talking about the religion as it is today and the fundamentalism that is in it, it's always interesting to me when I hear that word fundamentalism, because one, it refers to people who have been hijacked and aren't looking into the religious traditions that they're professing. Obviously, when we talk about Judeo-Christianity traditions, the structures that have been built up around them aren't really teaching the teachings of Christ. They're teaching their versions of it, which, if you just boil down the Bible to the teachings of Christ, it looks a whole lot different than what you're getting in most churches today. So I think it's just one of those things. Fundamentalism, it's not really fundamentally what's being taught in those books. It's what's being taught by people who want to move you one way or another.
That's exactly right. And the origins of Satanism were truly, diabolism, the actual worshiping of Satan and having black masses and things like that was an action against the Roman Catholic Church, which was the oppressive fundamentalism at the time. You were either Catholic or you were dead, before Protestantism even started. The whole is anti-fundamentalism, and you're absolutely right. It's not going to the actual texts. It's not seeing what this person actually said. In the case of Christianity, there's very compelling evidence that perhaps a lot of Christianity, what Jesus Christ taught, if he lived as a person, was Buddhism. It's very likely or possible that he traveled to the East. He got a lot of information about loving your enemies and being good to each other. And the Essenes advocated vegetarianism and respecting all life, and you certainly see that in part of the New Testament. But as you say, it's been twisted and perverted because people are lazy. They don't like to think. They'd rather have somebody else tell them what to think. They'd rather have somebody else chew up this document and spit it out as pablum and tell them what they're supposed to do with it. And unfortunately, that people are all too willing to do that and not question, not demand answers and clarity.
Well, and I think a lot of people aren't even concerned with it per se. It's just a function of whatever they're doing and whatever their existence is. It's a function. It's not. A lot of people don't even consider anything deeper than what to do in their day-to-day lives. So, the nature of existence, existentialism, and things like that never even enter the foray, and they're just kind of existing. And I think that's how most people function. And it is one of those things you mentioned, the misanthropy of Anton, and that it really probably comes when looking at the human race as a whole and not dealing with the individuals. When you look at the human race as a whole, it's just this stupid mass that's moving towards self-destruction. But when you break it down and you talk to individuals who are included in that mass, that would include yourself and myself, the thoughts and that are expressed maybe don't even match that herd mentality that for some reason we're moving towards the destruction, and it's kind of like trying to hold the tide back.
Well, that's very true. And again, I believe that's where Anton LaVey's passion really was, because he saw this short-sightedness and this suicidal tendencies of humanity. And he wept. He knew it didn't have to be that way, that each individual has a creative drive within him or her that could really do wonderful things. But unlike animals, he respected animals because they lived up to their true potential. As he said in one of the wonderful interviews toward the end of his life, that's one thing about the book is you can't he was really giving a lot of very revealing interviews toward the end of his life. A lot of those are collected in a book called Satan Speaks, not the interviews, but essays and opinions that he had. That was actually, it was published by Feral House as well, the one that's doing The Secret Life of a Satanist, the same publisher. But it was published posthumously. He was putting these essays and ideas together. But this was in an Answer Me interview. He said, I respect a spider more than I respect humanity or humans in general, because that spider is being the best spider that he can be. He's using all resources at hand to survive and thrive. Unlike humans who, as you say, shuffle through life, mostly worried about, what's on the internet, what everybody's talking about, and what they're going to eat this afternoon, rather than any real questions about who am I, where am I going, what do I really want, and who am I being controlled by?
But that's the thing. They say ignorance is bliss, and I think a lot of people don't want to wake up, even if they are on the cusp of it. They just want to stay asleep, and they want to move through life, and, they want that, what am I going to say, a workaday lifestyle. They want that. They seek that rhythm. They seek that, it's almost like a hypnotic trance that allows them to be put to sleep and not look at the world for what it is. Sometimes I'm going to honestly admit, sometimes I'm kind of jealous of that perspective, of having that inability to have a more open eye to what the world is and how it functions. But, at the same time, I don't think I would want to go back to sleep and become a zombie.
Yeah. My first teacher was my father. And he was not a Satanist, but he was a de facto Satanist, what Anton LaVey would call a de facto Satanist. He was a staunch atheist, and he taught me respect for life. He got me down on the grass and to look at life from a bug's perspective and see what that is. And he used to ask me, he'd say, okay, your eyes are open. Which life would you choose? Would you rather be the idiot rocking back and forth on the front porch, watching the world go by, or would you rather feel deeply? You'd feel the pain, you'd feel the terror, you'd feel, every life, every breath, every blade of grass, every leaf, every torture of every animal and human on the planet. But you would also feel ecstatic joy in music and art and soaring architecture and the beauty, the amazing humanity. When humans are the best that they can be, they're willing to sacrifice for those they love. They're willing to apply their idealism even to their own death. They're capable of wonderful, wonderful expressions of the human spirit. So, yeah, I guess it's not really a choice you make. It's a choice that's thrust upon you by your own nature, Daniel. You have no choice.
So it always comes down to the ability to have choice or not to have choice, which is, obviously free will. But that's something that's a huge topic on its own. And that's something that it always seems to boil down to. We're talking with Blanche Barton. She's the author of The Secret Life of a Satanist, the Authorized Biography of Anton LaVey. You're listening to The Grand Dark Conspiracy on QT1270, streaming online at QT1270.com. We're going to go ahead and take our first break, and we will be right back with Blanche on the other side.
He said, come on over here, son. Let me show you around.
And we're back. You're listening to The Grand Dark Conspiracy on WQTT 1270 AM, streaming online at QT1270.com. You want to go out to Grand Dark Conspiracy? I've got links up so you can find out more about Blanche on the GrandDarkConspiracy.com homepage, as well as get yourself a copy of the book, The Secret Life of a Satanist, the Authorized Biography of Anton LaVey. Links are up right now. You'll be able to click through and go to Amazon, but it's also available through feralhouse.com, and it's also available on churchofsatan.com. So any of those avenues you want to go out and get a hold of a copy of the book, I would encourage you to do that. Blanche, before the break, we kind of were talking about the basic philosophies of Satanism, as well as, some of the problems, I guess, so to speak, with the human condition here on Earth. Well, I don't know where else there would be humans, but that is kind of where we were. One of the things that we kind of touched on was there seems to be a parallel between the Satanist philosophy and atheism, and that's one of the things that I definitely picked up on, when I read the Black Bible way back when, and again reading the book The Secret Life of a Satanist, was that there seems to be a parallel in the thought, about how to deal with the universe. But with Satanism, is there any kind of mysticism or thing, you mentioned rituals and you mentioned magic? I mean, is that still come into play with that, which I know would not come into play with atheism?
Yeah, exactly. There is very much an element of the poetic or the supernatural within Satanism. I think if I were to Satanism, it would be sort of militant atheism. But I think atheism, it's a wonderful philosophy, or humanism, if you're more prone to seeing the wealth of wonder in humanity, which many of us aren't. But we see the danger. I think it's less atheism and more anti-theism. We see the danger in creating these lives for yourself from a very young age. And when children are brought into temples or churches and taught this is the truth, that's very dangerous. First of all, it's usually very closed-minded. It's very anti-intellectual, generally anti-scientific. But it's a world built on sand. And when the child grows up and gets old enough to start questioning, where is God? Where is heaven? Is it up in the sky? Is it where? How do I get there? What are these things you've been teaching me since I was born? And they begin to suspect that their parents are either lying to them or insane. And that creates a real conflict for a child, So when you start from the rational, that's your bedrock. Then you have poetic aspects that you can add to that. We do have rituals within the organization, within individual expressions. We have the basic 3 rituals that are described in the Satanic Bible, which are compassion and vengeance, and goodness sakes. Anyway, we do apply them for very real reasons within the organization. And compassion, destruction, and lust, of course. How could I forget lust? And you use images that are powerful for you to evoke feelings within you. You're not talking to some devil out there. These are conjuring up powers within you, your life force, to either evoke or exorcise certain things within you. Say, for example, if you're working in a work situation and this person at work is causing a lot of problems, they're going out of their way to cause you problems. It's not just a consequence of working with them. They're constantly needling you, they're undermining you at work, they're creating situations where you don't get moved ahead properly, you don't get recompense. And so instead of, just seething and being angrier and angrier, you externalize those feelings. You go into the ritual chamber, you summon up the demons, you summon up the devil himself, and all of nature to act in a destructive manner against this person who is causing you real problem. Now, when there's enough emotional impact charging that, and you throw out those feelings, it's out of you. You don't have to worry about it anymore. You've charged it, you've done it, you walk away from it, you let go of the rope. Now, what the consequences are of that action, he may get promoted to a wonderful spot in Tahiti or something, but he's out of your life, he's out of your office, he doesn't have any effect on you anymore. So, these destruction rituals or lust rituals or compassion rituals are things that we indulge in, especially as a young Satanist, because there's a lot of holdover sometimes from other religions that you want to get over. It's a way of building up a reserve for you, a magical reserve of energy, so that you can draw on that energy when you need it. As Satanists become more mature in their philosophy, a lot of times they don't ritualize formally as often as they do, but your whole life it becomes a ritual. You're creating this conversation between you and the earth, between you and nature, between you and your better nature all the time. So that dialogue, you don't necessarily have to step into a ritual chamber to get into that state anymore. And I know a lot of religions and a lot of meditation groups especially sort of go in that same direction, where it no longer has to be formally ritualized. You're using your power in the world as you move through the world in a very real way.
You know, that was one of the things that I mean, we were talking about the destruction. I mean, there was a whole story related about Jane Mansfield, and you know how that all came about. And I believe her husband. I can't remember exactly how. But, you know, the lighting of candles and Anton getting really upset about the ignorance of this person doing that. I don't know if you remember that story in there or not.
Oh, yes. Yes, I certainly do. The problem was with her attorney. That he was the real bane of her existence and a thorn in Anton LaVey's side, because Jane had learned of Anton LaVey and was very attracted to his philosophy. She said it was Kale Gibran with balls. She was a very earthy kind of person. She was a very intelligent woman, but she used her assets mercilessly to get what she wanted. And she thought that Satanism made perfect sense to her. And so she wanted to meet Anton LaVey. She met him. She, fell in lust with him. And she wanted to keep in close contact with him. But at the same time, she was going, Sam Brody was an attorney that had sort of attached himself to her, as people do with celebrities. And he was helping her go through her divorce and helping her protect her rights with her children. So he was a necessary evil in her life, but he was very jealous of Anton LaVey's relationship with Jane and wanted to put a stop to it in many ways. And at one point, he went into the ritual chamber and lit a candle and was sort of scoffing at the stuff in the main ritual chamber. And that space is reserved and charged with special energy, very intense energy. And when Dr. LaVey heard what he was doing, he went in there, blew out the candle, and said, you have no idea what you've done, what you've evoked. And Brody, sort of ha ha ha, and did his scoffing some more. But Anton said to Jane, stay away from him, because he's evoked very powerful forces against him, and I stop it. I can't be held accountable for what happens to him. So things started going downhill for Brody. He broke his leg at one point. He had a couple of close scrapes in cars, and then this fateful night, they were on a road. Jane and Sam Brody and another young gentleman was driving them, and she was going to another city in the South for another interview, another show, and they got behind a truck that was spraying for mosquitoes. The driver of the truck didn't see the driver of their car did not see the truck, and because of the mosquito spray, and ran right into the back of it, and Jane was killed immediately, as was Sam Brody, and the dogs that were traveling with her as well. They said that she was decapitated, which technically she was. The top of her head evidently was sheared off, not to be too graphic. But the interesting thing was Anton LaVey, when he got the call about Jane, he was clipping some clippings from it was a picture of him putting a wreath on Marilyn Monroe's grave. I think it was in a German newspaper or magazine. And he got this call from a journalist wanting a reaction of hearing of Jane Mansfield's death. Well, he hadn't heard of Jane Mansfield's death yet, and he set the phone down. And the journalist had called him because she had Anton's number in her address book, one of the top numbers. And so he turned to what he was clipping, and he turned it over, and he saw that on the back was a picture of Jane, and he had inadvertently cut through her head, through her neck, when clipping the picture on the other side.
Well, the thing that really struck about me, coming back to the point where we were talking about the rituals and stuff that they're performing, one of the things that I never was aware of was the fact that there was this assumptive belief in, the power of magic within it. Because reading the Black Bible, I know they had the rituals in there, but it really never kind of touched on, at least not that I picked up on, the belief in anything or the powers other than there was a negative force in the energy that could be a force or energy that could be used for your will, but I didn't understand to what extent that was being used and believed in until I read that particular story.
Mm-hmm. Well, it is illustrative of the way magic works sometimes, and I believe Anton LaVey largely thought of satanic practice as strengthening, focusing, but also almost a proto-science, because he had done rituals throughout his life. Once he began to understand ritual magic, and he was very frustrated with when he looked into Aleister Crowley or other names that, Rosicrucianism or something that was supposed to be real stuff, the real magic. And he went to these people and he tried to see what they were about, and it was all pablum as far as he could see. It wasn't real guts. It wasn't real call forth these energies as friends. Don't put yourself in a circle and call them forth in the name of Jesus Christ, or, protect yourself with angels or something. No, these are your friends. These are your comrades. Call them forth and from the ethers, call them forth with pride and give yourself over to them and allow them to strengthen you. He believed very much that satanic practice was a proto-science. There's a lot that we don't understand about the energies of the earth, the energies that we sometimes call ghosts, sometimes call UFOs. And Jacques Vallée has done a great deal of work in that direction, and he was a close comrade of Anton LaVey's in the very early days. Annie Michel, your listeners might very well know, about the Morning of the Magicians, the allusions and archetypes that Anton very much worked with and believed in the early days of the organization. They were performing rituals on a weekly basis, on a very frequent basis. And he believed in the majesty of these rituals and ceremonies, in the heritage. Some of them had come from France, from the early days of diabolism, from Germany, Das Tierdrama, the workings of the Yazidi in the Middle East. And these all were calling forth very powerful archetypes in a way that unleashes and perhaps connects us to some continuance, some resonance that we don't quite understand, but that we can apply in our own lives through magic.
We're talking with Blanche Barton. The book is The Secret Life of a Satanist, the Authorized Biography of Anton LaVey. You're listening to The Grand Dark Conspiracy on WQTT 1270 AM, streaming online at QT1270.com. We're going to go ahead and take a break, but I want to encourage you during that time to go on out to granddarkconspiracy.com. Links are up to get more information on Blanche and the Church of Satan, as well as the book, The Secret Life of a Satanist, the Authorized Biography of Anton LaVey. Go ahead and click on that link. It'll take you to Amazon. We'll be right back.
WQTT Marysville. News, sports, weather, and great oldies all day long. Lock it on. True Oldies, QT 1270.
And we're back. We have Blanche Barton on the line with us, and we're talking The Secret Life of a Satanist, the Authorized Biography of Anton LaVey. You're listening to The Grand Dark Conspiracy on WQTT 1270 AM, streaming online at QT1270.com. So before the break, we were kind of touching on, just exactly how much magic or mysticism is part of it. And one of the things in the book you mentioned, like Aleister Crowley and a few other people, these magical traditions that were supposed to be, useful or whatever. Anton didn't see them as such, and it sounds to me like he kind of stripped away the pomp pomp and circumstance that was created, or a lot of the things to make this into something that was much more streamlined and easier to access?
Yeah, I think his frustration was the obfuscation. And in the very beginning of the Satanic Bible, he makes it clear. There's a wonderful quote, if I can find it. This book was written, this is the Satanic Bible, with very few exceptions, every tract and paper, every, quote, secret grimoire, all the great works on the subject of magic are nothing more than sanctimonious fraud, guilt-ridden ramblings and esoteric gibberish by chroniclers of magical lore unable or unwilling to present an objective view of the subject. And he talks about white magic versus black magic, and how, white magicians want to only do good and they can never do anything, bad in the world. Well, he says that's bullshit. It's magic is magic. It's a tool, and you can use it for your own good. You can use it for your own ill. If you don't understand what you're working with, then it can come back and bite you big time. So he understood that it was powerful magic that he was working with, and not everyone is ready to stand up in a ritual chamber, say "Hail Satan" with a full heart and a full voice, and conjure that up within themselves. They're still restricted, and they've still got guilts, and they've still got this wash of shoulds and shouldn'ts and pain within them. That's part of American culture, perhaps international culture as well. And it's dangerous to unleash these forces within yourself if you don't fully understand what you're doing. Not that some demon's going to come and attack you, but that you are going to attack yourself as a consequence of your own ego. Most people are afraid to live fully. Anton used to say most people have more of a fear of success than they do a fear of failure. Because if you succeed, it means you're actually going to live your dreams and live up to the expectations that you might have of yourself. So that would be a terrible thing for most people if they actually got everything they wanted. Much worse for them if they got what they deserved, which is another conversation altogether. But yes, satanic magic is a way to access these forces within you, and it's not black magic, it's not white magic. Magic is magic. We use it for our own benefit and our own glory. That's as it should be.
Well, that's one of the things that it's about, using your will to change the world that you live in. It's to manipulate the world to fit your will.
That's correct. There are two forms of magic. There's greater magic, which is ceremonial magic, and then there's lesser magic, which is, you talk about manipulation. It's manipulating the people around you and the world around you and your circumstances and yourself to better your own condition and state of being. Another thing, getting back to the mumbo-jumbo that had been packaged as magical enlightenment before Anton LaVey came along, a lot of them have this veneer of, we're so smart and we're ascended, and you can't have the knowledge that we have because you're just not ready for it. So if you give us $12.95, we'll give you another package of wisdom, and then you can move forward from there. But you can't take it all in at once. And it was a lot of just, again, selling people wisdom and mysticism for their own goals, which, in a satanic sense, I guess it's fine, but it's very frustrating if you actually want to get at some truth. And so he did want to get at some truth and provide people with a clear path to being able to see the wisdom and evoke this strength and power and determination within yourself.
So, I'm wondering, with the whole, is this something that needs to happen if you're a Satanist? Do you need to engage in the ritual magic and things like that? Or is it just about the rebellion and you can take what you want from it as a philosophy?
A lot of Satanists don't choose to engage the poetic aspects, the ritual aspects of it, and that's fine. They think the philosophy makes a great deal of sense. They like especially the lesser magical part of it, which is the more mundane, everyday, getting what you want sort of thing, whether it's politically, economically, through a business or through your creative art, that's great. But a lot of Satanists find that they like the idea, for me especially, when I was young and I was looking at different philosophies, as young people often do, the magic that I found in Satanism was the reconciliation of apparent opposites. It was taking the rational. It was taking the philosophy, the logic, the reason of man, but also the poetic. And again, getting back to why I'm not an atheist, why I'm a Satanist and not an atheist, is I'd feel like I was missing something. I'd feel like I was missing out on a great deal of human experience if I just left it at atheism. Because I feel that the inspiration, the power that can be evoked in the human spirit through metaphor, can really unlock and unleash creative verve and energy that isn't really approached with just atheism. But if a Satanist likes the philosophy, feels very drawn to the images of Satan, but doesn't really want to express that in the ritual chamber because they feel silly, or they just don't think it's good for humanity to compromise your rational mind that way. I totally understand that, and I get that, and there are many, many ways to express Satanism. I think one of the keys of Anton LaVey was he never claimed to be getting the word from Satan. He never claimed that this was the given word of anybody but himself and the smart people who had come before him that he gathered together in this philosophy. Ambrose Bierce, G.B. Shaw, Jack London, and the Romantic poets, and a lot of the Enlightenment thinkers, existentialists, of course. He bowed to all of these, but he got a lot more from Ambrose Bierce and his Devil's Dictionary than he did from Aleister Crowley. Getting back to non-ritualizing Satanists, that's certainly an expression of Satanism.
I'm just curious because it seems to me that it's more about, the individual. And like you said, this is a religion, so to speak, for the non-joiner, which is kind of paradoxical, but at the same time, I think that once again, coming back to human nature, we always seek compatriots, in our philosophies. We always want to have somebody that is going to at least accept what we believe. If they don't believe it themselves, they're going to at least listen to our views on.
It was very important for me and for a lot of Satanists. They pick up, as you say, the Black Bible, the Satanic Bible, and they look at it, and it's stark, and they start reading it, and it's like, okay, what is this about? What is this guy trying to sell me? And you start reading it, and you say, oh my God, there are other people out there who think like I do. It's not a question of converting people. We're not standing out on street corners. You'll never see a Satanist, knocking at your door at 7 o'clock in the morning, thrusting a pamphlet at you, do you know Satan? It's not like that. It's more, we're there for people who already have this within their soul, who come to it through reason and magic and want to express it. People pick up the Satanic Bible, they read it, and they say, my God, there are people who think like I do. I never knew that I should be calling myself a Satanist all this time, but here it is, right here. This guy has it all right here, and I didn't know that there was a name for it. Or they take the book and they, read a little bit of it, or don't even read it at all, and they throw it across the room in disgust, and that's great. We don't want followers. Anton LaVey, as I said earlier, was told early on, you'd get a lot more people if you just call it something other than the S word, And he said, I don't want a lot of people. I don't want a lot of people to use this philosophy. I think, as he wrote, quality is much more important than quantity. And he believed in higher wattage people and lower wattage people. And he didn't want his message to be confused or muddled or diluted by minds that just don't understand, that just don't get it, and can't apply it in their life. there have always been Satanists from the beginning of mankind, and there will be Satanists probably breathing the last breath that humans breathe when we die or evolve. By whatever name, they've always been called, whatever the context of the society is, but there have always been those who are defiant, who question, who challenge, who innovate, who explore. Those are the de facto Satanists, and those are the Satanists who guide us, known and unknown. They're the guiding hands that move society and civilization forward consistently.
We're talking with Blanche Barton. The book is The Secret Life of a Satanist, the Authorized Biography of Anton LaVey. You want to find out more about her, links are up at Grand Dark Conspiracy. As well, links are up for you to get a copy of the book, The Secret Life of a Satanist, on granddarkconspiracy.com as well. You're listening to the Grand Dark Conspiracy, of course, on WQTT 1270 AM, streaming online at QT1270.com. We're going to go ahead and take a break. We'll be right back. And we're back. We're talking with Blanche Barton. The book is The Secret Life of a Satanist, the Authorized Biography of Anton LaVey. You're listening to the Grand Dark Conspiracy on WQTT 1270 AM, streaming online at QT1270.com. Before the break, you made some really interesting points, and it brought up some questions for myself. You mentioned, you use the word soul, and one of the things that I find interesting, and you also differentiate between atheism and Satanism. I mean, there is a clear line there, at least as far as in the mysticism. But I'm wondering, is there, and maybe this is per individual, a belief of consciousness continuing after death within the philosophy itself?
Well, that's an open question for us. As far as we know, no one's come back to tell us. There are people who have had very interesting experiences as they're dying that come back and tell us, oh, I saw heaven, or I saw hell, or I saw God, or I saw my friends. And Anton LaVey had this in 1995 where he just collapsed. And he was taken to the hospital, he was revived, he was shocked back to life several times, and we joked that now he can start his own religion because, he died and came back. But he said he didn't see anything, but then he said, well, maybe I wasn't prepared to see anything, maybe it's because I don't really believe in any life after death except for what you make. The satanic posture, ostensibly, is that life is what you make it. We have this chance and this chance only. It's not like you're going to come back again. So make the very most of it that you possibly can. Every moment you breathe is luscious, is something to be savored. Because there are no guarantees that anything happens after this. And so make the most of everything you possibly can. Pull out all the stops and enjoy life to the very fullest.
So, and you also mentioned some kind of almost sounds like a unified theory almost about what the paranormal is. And you mentioned Jacques Vallée and that, that maybe the source of the power that you're using is part and parcel to do with anything that we're looking at with, the paranormal.
Well, again, the expression of Satanism runs the gamut from I don't believe anything. This is a wonderful way to wake people up and try to get people involved and get them involved in their own lives and wake them from their torpor. That's one extent. And then there are other ends of the spectrum of Satanism that like to explore more mystical paths, more spiritual possibilities. What is this force? Is there a force? Is there a sort of Gaia consciousness to Earth that maybe we're summoned forth, as I was reading a book recently, maybe we're supposed to be the immune system for Earth, and we're, getting some sort of messages right now because of the desperate times we're living in as far as the environmental impact we're having on the Earth. But the ultimate satanic answer is, I don't know. If you want to express vampirism, if you want to express mysticism, if you want to express extreme atheism, these are all within the possibility of being a Satanist. And unlike other religions, we don't have a dogmatic attitude beyond what's published is, the satanic statements and the actual dogma from Anton LaVey, which are available and very unrestricted as far as I'm concerned. But there are many expressions, and it's this diversity of opinion that creates a dynamism within Satanism. One thing I'd like to express and talk about the book and the final chapters of the book, The Secret Life of a Satanist, is what is Satanism as far as, was it a cult? Is it a cult? Is it simply organized from Anton LaVey's personality? Or is it something that has legs and a fine philosophy that can last through the generations? And that can only be deciphered or discovered after the originator dies. And so we've had time since 1997, since Anton LaVey passed away, to see where Satanism is going, if it's remained cohesive, and if it still provides direction for people. And I would say the answer is a resounding yes. The organization is still vital. Magus Peter Gilmore and High Priestess Peggy Nadramia are now at the head of the organization. They're very dynamic, they're very clear, and they have that wonderful vision that Anton LaVey had of the carny principles and the gaudy principles blended with the black candles and black capes and the more dramatic aspects of Satanism, because you have to have both. You really do have to have both for a complete picture. More and more people are drawn to the philosophy all the time. Young people, read it. It makes sense. And they can either join, you can become a formal member of the organization, or you can just read the books and apply it in your life. It's not like we're asking for monthly dues from people. It's not a money-making organization at all. Anton LaVey, could have marketed it. He could have had posters and T-shirts, and people who say, he was just in it for the money, or he was a huckster, or, carny, or something like that. They didn't know the man. They had no idea what he was doing with the philosophy. He could have really sold it and made a lot of money off of it, but that's not the way that he wanted to go. He wanted it to remain pure, and when it was in his hands, and he kept it in his hands until his death, he never compromised, he never backed down, he never, no deathbed confessions or, I made such a terrible mistake. Not at all. He was a man of integrity, and ultimately, strangely enough for a Satanist, I would say he was a man of honest expression. And in today's society, we see hypocrisy and politicians who say one thing and vote another way, or that compromise their morality, stand up as moral, upright people, and then, send these stupid naked texts to women or whatever whatever their little peccadillos are. They get caught up in these ridiculous situations. And where is a man of integrity? You begin to feel like Diogenes, looking for the honest man. He's Anton LaVey. I mean, he was demanding and misanthropic and angry and passionate and creative and driven and ultimately absolutely honest in his feelings and the expression of his life.
Well, that was one of the things, you talk about, he had the opportunity to kind of exploit it monetarily more fully if he had so been inclined. He kind of disappeared from the public eye for a good while, did he not?
Well, he became, I think after the first years of Satanism, of the expression of the Church of Satan, he was doing, in the very early days, he was doing a lot of ritualizing, a lot of public appearances. He had his lion, of course, and he used to take Togar, his lion, to the elementary schools in the area and have the kids pet a real lion so that they could, have some feelings of camaraderie with a wild animal, which he very much believed in and loved very much. And so he was much more above ground. He did a lot of interviews. He wrote the Satanic Bible. Then he wrote the Complete Witch, which is now re-released as the Satanic Witch, also through Feral House. He wrote the Satanic Rituals. And he was doing a lot of publicity, expressing his philosophy. People were very interested. A lot of the nudie magazines, of course, were very interested because we had nude altars. And so they could take pictures of lots of nude girls, which was fun. and indulgent, and an expression of, for us, the carnality, the ultimate carnality of man. And what's more beautiful than a naked female form? I mean, that's gorgeous. So we worship the human achievement and glory in the human form. But then I think he felt that people kept wanting to have him swish around in a black cape and horns, and they weren't really listening to his philosophy. So he did sort of go dark for a while. He backed away from doing so much open publicity for everybody who asked, and he became much more selective. I think that was a wonderful idea. When he reemerged, he sort of brought the noir aspect into his expression of the philosophy, which was very much a part of his soul as well, the film noir, anti-hero, and the American expression of that form in the theater. But people, by that time, there was a new generation of young people coming up who really were hungry to hear what he had to say. And they were interested in the music that he played, sort of the beginnings of the sort of martini crowd. He called it bombastic music, jazz. This revival of evocative music was just beginning in the 80s. And then we went through the whole satanic panic from mid-1980 to early 1990s, and that required us to sort of step forward and say, no, we do not sacrifice children, no, we do not sacrifice animals, this is what Satanism is really about. So that kind of, he did a lot of work, he didn't do interviews, he had people like me and other people within the organization who were very articulate proponents and could communicate what Satanism was about. But behind the scenes, he was doing interviews with humane societies, with the Cult Awareness Network, with even Christians who came to him and wanted to know what Satanism was about. He would talk to them about what it really was, and of course, law enforcement, FBI. He was on first-name basis with people within the San Francisco Police Department. Of course, he'd worked with the police department years earlier, but he made himself available so that people would know what Satanism really was.
Well, and that's just it. I mean, you mentioned that he worked with the police as a crime photographer prior to that, so it would make sense that he would be kind of in tune with what was going on there, at least with the law enforcement. You know, and that covers a lot of ground. You know, you talk about the satanic panic in the mid-'80s up into the early '90s. That was something that, you know, a lot of people still debate to this day, whether it was real or not, and all that. I mean, that all is what it is. You know, it seemed to have been probably to the benefit that he kind of went dark, because one of the things that I remember in the book was, like, he was mentioning, like, some of the people that would come around early on to the Black House and take part in the events that would go on there were like, you're no fun anymore. You know, and it took he had to take, I think, in order to be taken seriously, he had to take a more reserved approach to putting it out there.
Yeah, he hit people over the head with a 2x4, and he slapped him across the face with a wet fish a little bit, and then he needed to back up and say, okay, now I've got your attention, this is what I'm really about. And you know, I think he got a good reaction that way. A lot of the people that originally were, you know, enthusiastic, perhaps were enthusiastic for the wrong reasons, you know, or maybe they just liked the fun idea of being naughty and going to the rituals. So, socialites, some movie stars. I do say that Jane Mansfield was not in that category, because she truly understood the philosophy, and I think it really vibrated with her very well. Sammy Davis Jr., too. I think he understood the philosophy very well, and he pointed people who he felt were ready. He would talk about people in Hollywood. Sometimes they were ready, sometimes they weren't ready, but he was attracted to the philosophy as well. And others, you know, who can or cannot be named in business and politics, but I think it did, even in the fun early early days, I think people were just ready to hear what he had to say. It was the right combination of outrage and common sense. And humans are, they're very pragmatic people. We want to live our lives. We want to do well in the world. And all of this complication and obfuscation about, sin and guilt, and these are ways to make money off of you. They used to sell indulgences, the Catholic Church, to try to get money, and you had to pray for people to get them out of purgatory, and you had to pay, and it's always been a money-making proposition, and it doesn't need to hold people in thrall anymore. We've had the Enlightenment, we've got the scientific method, we know how the world works, and Satanism explores the frontier of scientific and spiritual exploration. We're not stuck back in, the Middle Ages.
Well, I mean, that's interesting about the Sammy Davis Jr., and I had always heard that, and, a lot of people would, kind of guffaw that he wasn't involved in that, but I find that very interesting, and it does make sense that, it would draw a lot of powerful people in, because I think, and it would resonate with them, because I would think that a lot of those people already were kind of living the philosophy without being aware of it. And I think that's a common thread. One of the things I think the first chapter is that the Satanists aren't made, that they're born. That's seems to be maybe, most people that are drawn to it are already there. I don't know, as far as when you're dealing with an organization of people who are, the Church of Satan itself, wired that way. I mean, I would imagine that there would be a lot of conflict within, and you would need some really strong leadership to kind of keep that organized and moving forward.
We do require strong leadership. Anton LaVey was a strong leader. Peter Gilmore is a strong and uncompromising leader. He has true vision. He and Peggy Nadramia both guide the philosophy and the organization in a very productive way. I mean, talk about big shoes to fill. He came forward as the first high priest after Anton LaVey, and he's able to be very clear with the direction of the philosophy. And that's what Anton LaVey wanted more than anything, was to keep the philosophy on track. And it does take strong leadership, because we've had periods where we had group rituals, and sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. If people like to get together and ritualize in a group fashion, of course, through the internet, you can find other Satanists that you want to practice with. That's great. Like you say, it's nice to get that resonance going sometimes, to say, hey, I'm not alone. I'm not the only person in the world that sees the world this way. But it is, we do emphasize the ego. We do emphasize selfishness. And sometimes those egos clash. And that's why, we call the community of Satanists sort of an illusion, or it's on a very immediate basis in that it's activity oriented, because we're usually very dynamic individuals. We've got our own opinions. We're liberals. We've got ultra conservatives. We've got everybody in between. We've got people who are libertarians, blended with people who, think that usually bigger government is not better government, because we know where the Catholic Church and other big entities, big corporations, they just get away from themselves. So bigger is usually not better. But Anton LaVey had a vision of a cell organization, that he didn't want it to be centralized. Again, getting back to this idea of how he didn't exploit the Church of Satan the way he could have. He never wanted it to be a big building. He never wanted people to go to, well, I want to go see the Church of Satan. No, there is no Church of Satan. You are the Church of Satan. We're divided into cells. There's no central point that you can go and worship Satan with a big Baphomet on the top. In that, he was way ahead of his time, because now we have the internet, and everything is moving to more of a sort of decentralized. We see that decentralization is more powerful than a large organization that can be very vulnerable.
Well, right, because it's split across a greater distance. It's split across many people as opposed to one central location. I mean, even not to draw into like what's happening in the Middle East and stuff, but the enemy that we're fighting in the Middle East as a country, you know, the United States, it's much harder to deal with because they're not centralized. They're not, you know, they're kind of everywhere. You might kill one faction here, but there's another faction that's going to rise up and move on. So, I mean, it's a much harder thing to attack. It's a much harder thing to destroy if it's not centralized. And it's like you said, it's much more powerful. And it also allows for, I would think, greater input, actually, into what you're dealing with.
Yeah, exactly. Anton LaVey said that, you know, we're like nailing custard to the wall, you know, and the truth of the matter is there are a lot of leaders, political leaders, business leaders, people in government who are Satanists, who are avowed Satanists. I know who they are, but they don't feel that they can come forward and express that aspect of themselves. And that's fine. You know, what's best for them, what helps them move forward in life, that's the truth of their philosophy. Anton LaVey, again, had this idea that who you are on the outside is more important than who you are on the inside of the organization. He didn't want a lot of, you know, people staring at their belly buttons and debating about how to pronounce the Enochian keys, you know. He wanted people to take the organization's philosophy, go out into the world, and achieve something. And when individuals move forward, we all move forward. And that's the emphasis that Peter Gilmore and Peggy Madrania, the High Priest and High Priestess, have put on the organization now, is we are greater when you achieve in the real world. You know, just sitting around staring at each other and being in an echo chamber saying how wonderful Satanism isn't going to accomplish anything in the real world. If you're a priest in the Church of Satan, it means that you're having an effect, a real effect in the real world.
We're talking with Blanche Barton. The book is The Secret Life of a Satanist, the Authorized Biography of Anton LaVey. Links are up at grandarkconspiracy.com to go find out more about Blanche, and as well, the book has links up to take you into Amazon, but it's also available through feralhouse.com and the churchofsatan.com. We're going to go ahead and take a quick break here. You're listening to the Grand Dark Conspiracy on QT 1270 AM, and you're also listening to us streaming online anywhere in the world on your smartphone or any devices such as that you've downloaded us or you're on your desktop computer on QT1270.com. We'll be right back. And we're back. We have Blanche Barton on the line with us. We're talking about The Secret Life of a Satanist, the Authorized Biography of Anton LaVey. Go on out to grandarkconspiracy.com. Links are up. All kinds of information available to you by linking through there. You're listening to the Grand Dark Conspiracy on QT 1270, streaming online at QT1270.com. Before the break, we were kind of talking about how the organization that he put together is kind of decentralized, and it actually adds to the power of the organization, and that was his vision for how it should spread.
Yeah, I mean, there are essentials. We do have people that sometimes say, well, you know, I don't like the way you're running this, or I don't like the way you do that, and we say, fine, there's the door. You know, we don't want more people. We want the right people. If you're going to contribute to us and strengthen us, and if we see eye to eye on the basic philosophy is very, very simple. You know, it's based on common sense. The 9 satanic statements that were written in 69 are indulgence instead of abstinence. You know, vital existence, undefiled wisdom, kindness to those who deserve it, vengeance instead of turning the other cheek. Man is just another animal, more often worse than those on all fours, because he thinks he's spiritually evolved, and so he can be cruel to other animals on this planet, which is an abomination. And responsibility to the responsible, and most importantly, the 9th satanic statement is Satan has been the best friend the church has ever had, as he has kept it in business all these years. You know, the Christians need an enemy. and we're it, and that's great. I love being against hypocrisy and closed-mindedness and fearfulness of your own humanity. But Satanists don't really need enemies. You know, we see through that facade of us versus them. But we do have a group called the Church of Satan, and we're the ones who define and clarify what the philosophy is. There are others who come and they call themselves the Church of Beelzebub or the Guys of Belial, or the cohorts of Azazel or something, and they think that they'll be as big as the Church of Satan when basically it's a guy with a website. And they don't, they steal the best of what Anton LaVey had, and they think that that's enough. But we are the ones who have started it in 1966, who have maintained it, who have continue to clarify. Because, as you say, there's a lot of misunderstanding about what Satanism is, and the job of the Church of Satan now is to continue to put the satanic ideals out for people who are young people, who are new to the philosophy, to remain clear about what it is and what it isn't, and to encourage creativity, innovation, and forward thinking in every possible way.
Well, one of the things you said there that Christians need an enemy, I would debate that a little bit, because if you're following the teachings of Christ, that you shouldn't need enemies, you shouldn't seek enemies, and you should be able to move on that. But I think some people within the churches and the church structures want that enemy to drive people into their pews. I would just kind of have to just debate that point a little bit. The Christian aspect, probably they don't need enemies if they're actually following the teachings of Christ.
Well, probably not, but most churches as entities sell people sins and guilt, and you have to contribute or show up or pray properly to get rid of this original sin that you were born into. The Satanist feels that that's absurd, that you weren't born in sin, and that nobody died to cleanse you of your sins. And you don't owe anybody anything. You owe more to yourself and what you can achieve in this life. And that's where the real truth of it is. If this is your party. This is your one and only party. If you're not having a good time, then change something. Do something. Shake things up. Do something wild and radical if you have to, but get yourself out of your torpor so that you can move forward with your life and have a happy life.
Another thing that I thought was really interesting about the book, and it came, you mentioned on it, like the film Noir, and I read that he was into the German Expressionistic cinema a bit, like you mentioned specifically the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, and also like the Star of Baphomet, which comes from the Knights Templar. It seemed like he understood that if he's going to move this forward, he's going to have to create an aesthetic that meets the idea.
Aesthetics is everything. That's absolutely true. In Lesser Magic, you're making an impression on people. You're making an impression for yourself. And yes, the aesthetics of Satanism are very, very important. That blending of the film noir anti-hero, the one who sometimes finds himself up to his neck in a situation that he never deserved and never foresaw happening, and yet fights his way out through his own will and determination, blended with the satanic Miltonian or Faustian idea of creating your own life, of defying the status quo, defying God. He drew a lot from movies. He loved movies, and there's a wonderful list in another book that I wrote, the Church of Satan book, of wonderful satanic movies. And that's we could do another 2 hours on Anton LaVey, but I do touch on that in The Secret Life of a Satanist quite a bit, about how movies, what he saw as a satanic movie, and how it shaped his life, and his ideas of Satanism, again, a lot more than conventional mystical magical things that had gone before him.
Well, I thought that was interesting, the fact that every aspect of what he was doing, whether and the choice of the word evocative over provocative was particularly striking to me because, so often when we're talking about any form of art or creation, everybody wants to, go for the provocative, but I've always been of the idea that that's very easy to be provocative. It's very easy. You just have to do something that's an affront to somebody else's sensibilities, and then lo and behold, you've provoked people to be talking about your artwork. But when you get to a status of ability that allows you to actually evoke emotion rather than provoke a response, that is when you've reached a higher level.
Yeah, exactly, Daniel. That's a very good point that you bring up, because Anton LaVey did what he did because he was compelled to do it. He didn't dress in, the black capes and have the rituals that he did because he wanted to piss people off. I mean, yeah, there was a certain aspect of that, but anybody can do that. But he had more behind it than that. He had a purpose behind it. He wanted to shake people up. He wanted to rattle their cage a little bit and make them feel uncomfortable, so that they'd start questioning, they'd start demanding answers from themselves and from the entities around them. And it's only when you feel a little bit off kilter that you can evoke strength within yourself. And he said, I'd be doing this if I were just by myself. It's not that I want the attention, that I want to shock people. Other than that's just a means to an end. But unlike a lot of artists, like you say, they want to be provocative. Well, it's easy to be provocative and then just walk away. What do you have besides that? Okay, now you've got my attention. What do you have to sell? What are you telling me?
It is something that I think a point that a lot of people miss, and I think that is something that is sorely missing from the creative that is out there today. There's no honesty or evoking of emotion within that realm. It just seems to be, I'm going to shock you, and then there's no substance behind it.
Yeah, that's very, very true. And it's a sad state of affairs because he was a very creative man. Musically, he studied photography and utilized that very well. He was an artist, a painter, drawings, and he thought about art and architecture a great deal, and what that serves, what that serves man, how that evokes, sorry to keep going back to that word, how that brings forth strength within the human mind and the culture, and how it expresses so much within our culture. And he didn't have much patience with people who were purely provocative. There were a lot of those in the 60s, plenty of people, with and jumping around and being very outrageous, but he didn't really find a lot of substance behind what they had to do, what they had to say, what they were expressing, and that was frustrating for him.
Blanche, we're at the end here, and I want to encourage all the listeners to go out to GrandDarkConspiracy.com. Of course, the links are up for you to get yourself a copy of the book, The Secret Life of a Satanist, the Authorized Biography of Anton LaVey. Links are up there. Of course, links are up for you to get more information on all of what we've been talking about tonight, and also more information on Blanche. I want to thank you for coming on. I want to thank you for struggling through the bit of technical difficulties we had at the top of the show. I appreciate you hanging in there for us all to get to hear what you have to say.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to talk about Anton LaVey, and I would urge people to look into the book, whether they're a Satanist or not. He was an unusual character. He was a historical character, and they might be surprised at what they find when they read about him.
It is a very illuminating book. I would say that for sure. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. You've been listening to The Grand Dark Conspiracy on WQTT 1270 AM, streaming online at QT1270.com. So until tomorrow night, keep conspiring.